As far back as I can remember, I have loved animation. And although I wasn't much of a Disney kid or anything, to me, there was, and still is, a layer of magic to it all. As a kid, I never really cared to consider how exactly they're made or who exactly made them. And as an adult, even with all the details laid out before me, it feels like nothing short of a miracle. However, as much as I appreciate and hold dear the cartoons that I grew up with, much to the dismay of the kids next door, I grew up. Cartoons are, at this point to me, a bit of wacky juvenile fun I don't mind having every now and again. Something I can turn my brain off to and enjoy for what it is at face value in that particular moment. I'm someone that can speak to friends through obscure early SpongeBob jokes like it's my second language, but when it comes to more modern cartoons, things fail to find that same purchase in my mind. And that's certainly not to say anything bad about today's cartoons. I actually think a lot of them are pretty good. But of course, I'm not the target demographic anymore, and so the things I'm more likely to enjoy may not be present or taken into account. And so with that, as a fan of animation such as myself, outside of the more recent upswing of nostalgic returns and reboots, what is there to do? Well, as my name implies, I largely turn to anime, where there is no shortage of more mature works of fiction. And with the dozens of shows that pop up every season, there's almost always something new for me to look forward to and check out. However, following the advent of the ever-growing and consumer-compromising streaming wars, Western animation has seen a remarkable surge in new releases, many of which are continuity-based with overarching plot points, which, if you're familiar with the channel, is right up my alley. But be this as it may, I find there to be a few issues with this, at least in relation to my own personal desires. Firstly, even with this sort of narrative approach, most of these shows that are available very much cater to a younger audience, which I don't really mind all that much, but in the context of video games, although Super Mario Odyssey is great, I'm more likely to put a bunch of hours into something like Cyberpunk 2077. Besides that, although we're seeing new content, a lot of these shows are playing it safe by way of either nostalgia or the popularity of an already recognized IP. But with all that being said, I find myself coveting just about any bit of adult Western animation that isn't primarily a comedy, just for the sake of seeing more in the future. And although I was fashionably late to the party for Castlevania, it is damn good, and waiting for that next season is killer. But thankfully, another creation by the very same studio, Powerhouse Animations, has made that wait a bit more bearable. Blood of Zeus is currently an 8-episode action-adventure series that follows a young man by the name of Heron as he makes sense of his own destiny in a world of Greek mythology. And as someone who couldn't get enough of the Percy Jackson books when he was younger, there was an enjoyable familiarity to Heron's journey. And on the point of familiarity, although the series is an original one that describes itself to be a tale of Greek mythology that was lost and never transcribed, ultimately, it is still based in Greek mythology, and so it is something a lot of people can recognize and identify with. But at that, I do feel that a pretty healthy balance was met here when it comes to new and old. And as someone with a generous knowledge of Greek mythology, it's somewhat refreshing to see the more unsavory and explicit side of the gods be properly represented here. Blood of Zeus presents the gods as beings of supreme power that are virtually unapproachable to anyone or anything outside of their ilk. That when united, they are indomitable and perfect. But in personifying human concepts of power to such an egregious extent, they by extension represent the worst aspects of humanity: greed, envy, infidelity, sabotage, and deceit, to name a few. These are horrible people, and that's what makes them such enjoyable characters. But with that being said, I sadly cannot say the same for their lessers, as for the most part, the characters that lack divinity lack character almost entirely. Heron played the typical chosen one role and wasn't really much beyond that. And even then, I was never really sure why he was considered integral to winning the major conflict of the season from so early on. The main heroine of the story, Alexia, is this badass Amazonian warrior that is sadly only a badass Amazonian warrior. There's not really anything there past that. Even when things should, in theory, be more emotional for her character, we never really get much of anything from her besides cool fight scenes. The main antagonist of the story, Seraphim, was certainly more enjoyable to observe. He too wasn't anything groundbreaking, but over the course of the season, as we got to know him more and more, I found myself especially enjoying his scenes. By far, the two most interesting characters of the series are Zeus and Hera. They're pretty much a married couple that's decided to stay together for the sake of the kids and nothing more. Pretty much the entirety of the story revolves around their actions, and so it's hard not to consider them the actual main characters. Sidebar, Blood of Zeus is the one show on Netflix that I don't skip the credits of, and that's because they show off design concepts and rough drafts as they roll. And it is such a simple addition that I find myself really fascinated by, and I would love to see more shows adopt this sort of approach, because even without this, it is clear how much went into the design work of this series, as everyone and everything looks incredible. This show has my favorite visual take on Zeus, and Apollo is actual perfection. The man is just stunning. Overall, this is a show I do believe deserves a second season, and hopefully it gets one, as plenty of interesting seeds have been sown for some sort of continuation. However, it will most certainly need to improve its characters. The gods are easy, tons of people will walk in knowing a bit of what to expect, and for those who have only seen them through depictions like Hercules, will certainly be in for quite the shock. Characters like Charon and his companions are new additions here, original creations that need to be far more developed if we're to see them as anything more than pawns to the gods. If man is to inherit the world, show us why they deserve it and why we should care. If nothing else, this is where the crew should be able to flex their creative muscles. For me, Blood of Zeus was an enjoyable watch and one that I hope has a chance to improve. If you've already seen all 8 episodes, let me know what you thought of it. And if you've yet to check it out, I'm curious if you intend to. I've never really been much of a reviewer, but hopefully you guys enjoyed the video regardless. With so many interesting new shows entering the fray, this will more than likely end up a habit of sorts. And if you'd like to be here for that sort of thing, go ahead and subscribe to the channel for everything Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.